This way, I think, for spinach. Yeah, do you want to see too?
Sorry. Okay. I'm Shannon. Hi, nice to meet you. Trustee? Yes.
May I ask where you've been for the last year while we've been outside fighting for your job?
I have a senior mother who broke her leg, and I've been supporting my mother. I'm also a parent of a disabled son, so I had a lot of. But Don and I have been going to the protests in Toronto.
Yeah, she has been.
We've been, because I'm, well, OPSPO will probably not. Current ministry continues. We may lose OPSPO, so I've been sitting as a board of director.
Yeah.
We're all the trustees. We meet and advocate for things, so I've been doing my part through that.
And welcome to the
Okay, so nothing publicly
of the
done.
Carrollton District School Board
Nothing
for
public.
June 18th, 2026. I'd like to call our meeting to order.
Okay, good
Acknowledging
to
that this
thank
meeting
you.
is taking place on unceded Algonquin homelands. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Algonquin nations for their stewardship for these lands since time immemorial. Before we begin the meeting, there's an adjustment that I'd like to propose to the agenda. The reports referenced in the agenda will be tonight verbal reports, accompanied by a slide presentation with highlights, and of course an opportunity for all members of the audit committee to ask questions. This change results from a review process initiated by the Ministry of Education of the draft budgets for all of the school boards that are under supervision. So we submitted our budgets as required on time. They're now being reviewed by the ministry, and after the ministry has reviewed and approved them, then those budgets will be posted. It was my expectation and intention that that work would have been done in advance of this meeting, and so the materials would have been posted last Friday, and unfortunately that was not the case. As soon as the ministry has done its review process for all the boards under supervision, it's our intention to have them posted on the website and to be able to have public comment on the reports themselves. We were, however, I think we're the only board under supervision that was able to present our staff recommended budget in a public session, and we will hear tonight from our Chief Executive Officer and our Chief Financial Officer with a reasonable amount of detail into what is in the staff recommended budget, perhaps more detail than is normally covered in a presentation, simply because those documents were not provided in advance. And I would like to acknowledge the incredible effort of our CEO, Stacey Kay, and our Chief Financial Officer, Kevin, and Derek McMaster, our Deputy, or General Manager of Finance, I would say Deputy CFOs, it would be another term, for adjusting their presentations tonight to accommodate the circumstances that we face. And not just for that, but for the incredible amount of work that has been undertaken over the last, I'd say, 7 months leading up to this budget, the heavy lifting around the review of all of the expenses, the deep digging into our financial reporting system that has brought us to the staff recommended budget that you will see here tonight. So the adjustment to the agenda is they're not official reports, but the agenda would be a verbal presentation along with a presentation of a slide deck, which means that there will be no motions tonight for the committee to consider, but certainly every opportunity to ask questions. So with those amendments, do I have a mover for the agenda? Brian? And seconded? All in favor? So the agenda has been adopted. I'd now like to ask if anyone has a conflict of interest to declare. Seeing none. Delegations, we're moving on to item 5, delegation. We have one delegation this evening. I'll call the delegation to please come to the podium and present their delegation. Following their delegation, the committee may ask up to 3 questions of clarification. The response will be for up to 1 minute each. Please note that the delegate will not enter into debate or discussion. Also, please refrain from discussing personal information regarding students or staff to protect the privacy of identifiable individuals. I'd now like to call on Jessica Scallon. You have 4 minutes.
All right, thank you. My name is Jessica Scallon. I'm a parent of a child in the OCDSE. I'm here to speak as part of a group of concerned parents within the Ottawa School Board community. I'm here to speak to 2 closely connected issues: transparency in the current budget process and the need for clearly identified sustainable funding to support Two-Spirit LGBTQ+ students in the OCDSE. First, I want to acknowledge the complexity of developing a school board budget. I recognize difficult decisions must be made, particularly in constrained fiscal environments. However, complexity cannot come at the expense of transparency or community trust. As a parent, I rely on clear, accessible information to understand how budget decisions are being made, especially when those decisions directly impact students' well-being. In attempting to review and inform the 2026-2027 draft budget, I am concerned with the transparency and accountability on what is being funded and what this budget will look like. Clearly, those priorities have not been communicated in a meaningful way or posted on the website to allow meaningful engagement in the process. Our group has attempted to engage in constructive budget processes. We sent a letter to the OCDSE supervisor and other senior board staff on April 7th. This had 63 OCDSE parent signatures and we've since followed up multiple times requesting clarification on how these supports for Two-Spirit LGBTQ+ students will be reflected in the budget. To date, we've only received 2 short responses from the supervisor indicating that our letter had been received and was being reviewed. We asked twice for meetings to discuss our concerns and the valuable supports required for these students. That lack of communication makes it difficult to understand how equity commitments are being operationalized in real terms. This leads to our second point, the importance of dedicated, visible funding for Two-Spirit LGBTQ+ student supports. For many students, schools are one of the few places where they can feel safe, seen, and supported. Program staff, training, inclusive resources, and affirming spaces are not optional. They are essential components of a safe, equitable learning environment for student success. We're not simply asking whether these supports exist in principle, we are asking where they are reflected in the budget, how are they being prioritized, and how will their impact be sustained over time. Without clear identification of the budget, draft budget, in advance of this meeting, these supports are potentially at risk and become inconsistent and vulnerable to cuts dependent on individual schools rather than a system-wide commitment, which quite frankly brought us to the OCDSE as a family. We believe that transparency in this area strengthens accountability, and when commitments are clearly reflected in budget decisions, it builds trust with families and demonstrates that equity is not just a value, it is a funded priority. So tonight, we are asking the committee to consider the following. Ensure that funding related to equity and two-spirit LGBTQ+ supports are clearly identified and communicated, that a strengthening of public-facing transparency to make budget decisions more accessible and understandable within the new supervisor/no trustee model, and to improve responsiveness and engagement to the community inquiries, particularly when they relate to student well-being and inclusion. So we're here because we deeply care about this system, not just academic success, but the safety, belonging, and dignity of the students in the OCSD. Our understanding was that the draft budget was to be released on Monday, June 15, 2026, but we cannot find this draft budget and that must be approved by June 30th. And this is concerning from a transparency point of view. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there any questions? Jessica, I'd be happy to meet with you. Normally when requests come in for a meeting, a meeting is scheduled, so perhaps we can meet next week, or certainly before the budget is passed. So if you want to meet me after this meeting, or if a staff member can follow up with you, we'd be happy to make that arrangement.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving on to item 6, matters for action. Review of the audit committee minutes. I now call on a mover to approve the minutes of the April 28th meeting. Moved by Pat. We don't need a seconder at the committee, but all in favor? Okay. The minutes have been approved. I'll now move on to discussion items. I'll call upon Director Stacey Kay to provide remarks. I guess we're doing this in three sections, 3 chunks. We're going to be looking at the projected operating results for the year ended. This is a forecast for the year ended August the 31st, 2026. So this is where we think we're going to be at year end. We'll have a second segment where we'll look at the consultations done in relation to this current budget, and then we'll look at the staff recommended budget. So first we're looking at the projected operating results for this school year, which in our financial terms ends in August. And so I ask Stacey Kay.
Thank you. I will save the bulk of my introductory remarks until we begin the third item this evening. However, I will remind the committee that we did present the revised estimates in March. What we have before you this evening is our projected operating results as of at this time of year. And with that, I will pass it on to our CFO, Kevin Gardner, and General Manager Derek McMaster to take us through the details of this information.
Thank you very much, CFO. The projected operating results is an update of our revised estimates, and they do look good, and I'm going to ask GM or Master to actually go through the presentation, and if there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So today I'll be presenting the 2025-2026 projected operating results. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, this is a forecast that includes actual results up to the end of April with a forecast to the remainder of the year. The key takeaway from this analysis is that we had a better foundation to move from, and that was from the revised estimates that reflected a more realistic financial picture following a fiscal credibility assessment that I'll explain in the next slide. This provided a more solid basis for comparison when using our year-to-date results. Compared to prior years where we had budgeted a balanced budget, such as the 24-25 estimates, but the deficit reported $5.4 million, the deficit would have been almost $20 million if not for one-time funding that was applied. So this shows kind of how necessary it was to revise our assessments. Previous slide, please. So the current status is that we are projecting an in-year deficit of $11.1 million. However, this is an improvement of $385,000 over the revised estimates that were just mentioned. And last of all, the context for the forecast is it's an important mechanism for monitoring our budget to understand trends, variances, and other events that could be impacting our resource allocation, our ability to identify budget needs, and once again, to refine future estimates. Next slide, please. So the fiscal credibility assessment. This is going back to the process we used in the revised estimates to correct unrealistic projections and assumptions that supported our prior balanced budgets. As mentioned with the comparative analysis, it led to unrealistic expectations and resulted in significant deficits. So the methodology that was used to establish this baseline was comparative analysis of looking at prior year actuals and budget estimates, engaging all of our senior staff in reviewing a line-by-line budget for reasonableness, looking at in-year spending reviews to focus on priority areas, and lastly, the realignment of our budget provisions to ensure that they reflected our actual costs. Next slide, please. So the financial overview of our projected 11.1 deficit, while the change of 385,000 from the revised estimates to the projected results was very close, there were some changes in revenues and expenses that I will now explain. Next slide, please. In terms of our forecasted revenue changes, our reported revenues or forecasted revenues are $7.2 million greater than revised estimates. The four key drivers to this were $5 million due to increased funding for teacher qualifications and experience funding, and this is because of the timing of the reporting related to actual placements of teachers. So this was a good thing. The second one was a one-time contribution from OCNET, which is the Ottawa Carleton Education Network, which is a arm's length body from the board. So we have an equity transfer, so money that we've drawn from that entity of $3.6 million. Third of all is a net increase in our provincial grants. These are called responsive education program grants, and these were new ones that were introduced during the fiscal year of $0.7 million. And last of all, as we face decreasing enrollment, we've had to adjust our enrollment projections for this year, reducing that by $2 million, which reduces our funding. Next slide, please. So for the forecasted expense changes, there's 7 key drivers that led to a $6.8 million increase in our total expenses to increase it to $1.266 billion. The first is a $9.9 million increase in our instructional costs. As I mentioned, with the qualifications and experience funding, a portion of this cost driver was offset, 5 million of it, by that increase in funding, where the remainders are increases related to instructional staffing levels and pay rates. The second one, cost driver, is a $0.9 million increase related to educational assistant costs. This was mostly due to compensation factors of WSIB and retroactive payment costs. Third of all, we have professional and technical support compensation savings. This is mostly related to special education and is an area we'll be focusing on to better align budgets with actual spending costs. Fourth of all would be operations and maintenance savings. And this was primarily due to vacant positions in our facilities. Next slide, please. The next one is we do have a restructuring cost provision for the student-focused resource optimization project that Kevin and Stacey will be talking about later. So we did increase a provision related to the restructuring. We also had a $0.6 million offset in textbooks and supplies. And last of all, savings of $0.6 million in school office costs due to lower casual staffing costs that would be used for replacements. Next slide, please. So our forecasted accumulated deficit is now projected to be 20.9 million. As I mentioned, we do have about a $400,000 reduction in that because of the better financial position that we're forecasting. However, we continue to have concern in terms of our growing unrestricted accumulated deficit, with the goal of eliminating the deficit and growing our unrestricted surplus to target about 2% of our operating budget, which is approximately 22 million, and that's in accordance with ministry guidelines. Next slide. I will talk, oh, there we go. In terms of the next steps, we'll be talking about the student-focused resource optimization project integration. That's really key to financially stabilizing and to ensuring investments are directed towards student support, student achievement, and well-being. These findings have been rolled into our estimates for 26-27 operating budget, and as I mentioned, the goal of eliminating the accumulated deficit through strong monitoring and adjusting of budget provisions as we go throughout the year. That is all, Chair.
Thank you, Derek, for the presentation. So now looking at the current fiscal year, I'll ask our committee members if they have any questions. Brian?
Just one, any significant risk items in achieving the projected results that are still outstanding that you might not have a handle on? Or I know it's almost the end of August now, so it's probably not much, but if you want to highlight anything.
I think the biggest risk is year-end adjustments, such as any legal accruals or WSIB actuarial valuations. Those may have an impact. They could be beneficial impacts or less than beneficial. So those would be the two bigger items. We will be continuing to monitor this through the summer, and we'll have a better understanding of it. But I would say those would be the bigger items. Thank you.
So I would just offer a comment from your presentation, Derek. The good news is that we've taken an operating deficit from what was over 20 million down to 11.1 million. The bad news is that we've got an $11.1 million deficit for the current year, which, because we have no reserves, it just extends it's on top of the accumulated deficit that we came into the year with. Is that an accurate summary of high level of where we're at?
Yes, it is. So definitely it would be ideal to have it even lower, and as Derek had mentioned, there was one-time money being used to get that $11 million deficit position. So realistically, there were some items in there that we hadn't identified, and we have corrected again now in our budget for the coming year. And I'll touch on that. And those relate to some compensation savings. Yeah, so.
Thank you. We're now moving to 7.2, which is discussion on our public consultations related to this budget. I'll call upon our CEO, Stacey Kay.
Thank you. I will soon pass the mic over to our CFO. It's Derek again, providing that update this evening. This represents the second half of the feedback that we did receive through our Engage survey as one of the tools and opportunities for our community to contribute their perspectives and priority areas, which have directly informed the budget that we will present this evening. Thank you, Derek, for the update on the second half of the survey.
Thank you very much. So I'll be presenting the 2026 public budget consultation final report. Next slide, please. So this year, we launched a 2026-2027 budget page on our Engage OCDSB, thanks in part to our communications team. One of the purposes of this site was to present material as it was developed, and also to launch a survey related to this budget process. So a survey was conducted from March 24th, 2026 to May 15th, 2026. We also provided an update on this survey at the last audit committee meeting on April 28th. And due to the current context of being under ministry supervision, this was a preferred method of consultation. However, supervision has allowed opportunity to consult in other ways too. Next slide, please. The positive thing is since we last reported, the survey responses have almost doubled, and in total, we received 299 responses. The biggest responding group were parent and caregivers at 147 responses, or 49%, followed by OCDSB staff members at 125 responses and 42%. And then for our OCDSB students, we received 17 responses, making up 6%. And last of all, we had community members or other, and that was 10 responses and 3%. The purpose of the survey wasn't a statistical exhaustive survey or intending that it would be capturing all community themes, but it is a good touch base in terms of the sentiments out there, and it was anonymous. Next slide, please. I'm going to walk through the key budget themes that were developed from our review of the survey. And we were able to put these into 6 categories. The first one that was very prominent was investments in special education. There was widespread support for additional staff resources, especially educational assistants, ECEs, mental health workers, and special education program for our students. This was prevalent among all groups. The second one was reducing OCDSB administrative overhead, so seeing less funding and central departments and executive costs and more money funding going to the classrooms. Third of all was a combination of wanting to see reduced class sizes, but also wanting to see increased funding from the Ministry of Education to support more teachers and these lower class sizes to improve student well-being and reduce educator burnout. Next slide, please. The fourth theme was around school consolidation and generally better use of our buildings to both support the communities and to support the financial position of OCDSB. So that's about utilizing them better, closing or selling vacant schools for long-term savings. The fifth one was related to school infrastructure, about urgent needs, health and safety needs, to upgrade the physical conditions of our school in terms of air conditioning, water quality, and better washrooms were some of the examples provided. And the last one was a theme regarding the use of technology versus traditional resources, and the preference for actually reducing some tech spending in favor of traditional resources to reduce screen time. Next slide, please. So the next steps following this is what we're doing today in terms of the budget development and ensuring that there's alignment between the proposed budget spending and the feedback that we've heard today. And this is all within the fiscal constraints and our provincial funding guidelines and our mandates. We have the overarching goal of eliminating the structural deficit and restoring our long-term financial stability, and that's both a corporate goal and a supervision goal. And last of all, our objective of submitting a budget by June 30th to the ministry. That's all.
Great, thank you, Derek. I know we're going to hear more about the consultations and other input that was gathered in addition to the Engage survey that was up on the website as we as you present the budget for 26-27. But is there any questions for our General Manager of Finance on the survey that was in the feedback? That's right.
I have one just for my own education before it takes. consolidation by getting rid of vacant properties, isn't that subject to the ministry approval? It's not something that we can take in isolation, is it? I'm trying to remember if that's the case, but somebody can tell me if we're wrong.
Yes, absolutely. There are a series of processes by which we would declare buildings and properties surplus to our needs. It does require ministry approval before proceeding to disposition. There is also a fair bit of regulation around how we are able to use the proceeds of disposition.
So, I can add to that as well. Effectively, there's a moratorium in the province on the closure of schools, so it would take exceptional circumstances. What the minister has said that in boards where they are facing particularly challenging circumstances, that he would receive recommendations from those boards about school closures, and so the moratorium is not blanket and cast in stone, but they would consider the recommendations from boards on a case-by-case basis. But it's a fairly rigorous, time-consuming process to go through. In the meantime, we are selling facilities that don't have students, and we sold one confirmed sale, and we have proceeds on another one that's close to being completed.
There were a number of accommodation reviews, some of which resulted in school closures going back to 2017, 2018, and it is some of those buildings and properties that we have received permission to proceed to disposition, that those proceeds will be recognized, I believe, in the next fiscal year.
And in the capital fund. So now we're going to go to item 7.3, which is the staff recommended draft operating and capital budgets. I'll turn the meeting over to our Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you. I am pleased this evening to provide introductory comments to support the presentation of the 2026-2027 staff recommended budget. This document is more than just a financial plan. It is a roadmap back to stability and brings the OCDSB back to a position of strength. This budget demonstrates an investment in what is most important, our students. It is also a testament to what we can accomplish when the OCDSB operates as a united team. This budget sets up the blueprint for critical actions to dramatically reduce the deficit while maintaining and expanding essential supports for our learners. Quite simply put, this budget puts students first. This vital work has been shaped by our community, and importantly by our parents and staff. Both the supervisor and myself have learned and benefited from the town hall meetings with school council chairs, the budget survey, and discussions with our advisory committees. The priorities of our parents have been made abundantly clear. A school district focused on learning and rigorous high-quality programs. School environments that are safe and facilitate learning, and well-rounded experiences, whether it be in the arts, sports, or other passions that allow our students to thrive. These themes were clearly echoed by both our principals and vice principals, who effectively represented their staff and students, bringing to life the everyday successes and challenges in our schools. Both the supervisor and myself have gained valuable insights and ideas from the perspective and practical strategies brought to us by our Federation presidents. We may not always agree, but we are on the same page that we work together for the benefit of our students and staff. We appreciate that all that we do is designed to create the conditions for excellence experienced by our students every day. We thank you. We thank the entire community for informing this work and for your shared commitment to making the OCDSB even stronger as we move forward together. Getting to this point has required making difficult decisions. We launched the Student-Focused Resource Optimization Project with one goal in mind: ensuring resources directly impact student achievement and well-being. Through this work, we have achieved permanent reductions and sustainable savings of $15 million, which, taken into consideration with the information presented by our General Manager, Derek, effectively reduces and eliminates the operating deficit that we realized this year. By streamlining central operations, we have avoided what could have been an $18.5 million deficit. While we achieved savings, we appreciated the pressing need to make investments in the system. At the top of that list is what we heard from parents and staff: the need for more support in classrooms for teachers and students. In this budget is the addition of 21.5 educational assistants to support the needs of our students in regular classrooms. We are presenting a carefully planned transitional deficit of $3.5 million. It is important to highlight that we are exceptionally close to our target of achieving balance, and this would have been achieved were it not for the impact of declining enrollment and a strategic decision to adopt a more conservative and responsible accounting practices. I am optimistic about our new direction and the staff that will deliver what parents and students expect and deserve. Guided by what our students, staff, and families have shared with us, we are refocused on creating classrooms that center learning and achievement, environments where students are thriving, and expanded opportunities to keep our communities engaged. Our priorities are clear, and they will guide us each and every day in the coming school year. This truly is a budget that puts students first. I would like to personally thank our budget team, many of which are here this evening, from our finance team. They have put in exceptionally long hours and a huge amount of dedication that is required to put together a budget that is as complex and robust as is required to support the OCDSB. I look forward to the discussion this evening and will now pass it along to our CFO, Kevin Gardner, to walk us through the specifics of the 2026-2027 budget.
Thank you very much, and I too would like to thank the finance team for their patience with me asking for all these changes to be made at the last minute, and that's so much appreciated. First slide, please. So I'm just going to jump right into the slide deck. It's fairly lengthy, but I will pause periodically and ask if there are any questions. So, as you're aware, we're under ministry supervision, and it's important to recognize that last year, the budget for 25-26 was initially presented as a balanced budget, but we soon found out that that was not the case. And with the revised estimates, we updated that projection to show a deficit of 11.5 million. And our most recent projection is along the same lines, maybe a little bit worse than the 11.5 million in the absence of some one-time funding. Ministry supervision has been in effect since June, so this is the reason for being under supervision. It's important to recognize that it was financial mismanagement and it continued to push the reserves.
Shame on you, Kevin. Thought you were a man of integrity.
Depletion of reserves and no plan to restore financial stability. The goal is to return the board to fiscal stability and to focus investments on classrooms and student success. So next slide. So what's the financial environment that we find ourselves in? We have declining enrollment, and that is a challenge. Enrollment is declining for various reasons, demographic reasons, lower birth rates, and limits on immigration. Interestingly, we just heard on the news that Canada's population actually decreased in the past quarter. So it's just the reality that we find ourselves in. The declining enrollment reduces our funding, and that has a direct impact on our costs, or supporting the costs, but reducing costs is even more challenging. There's a structural deficit also and we have no accumulated surplus, meaning that we have no financial cushion to fall on should we have unfavorable variances, either in revenues or in our expenses. Next slide, please. We also have an inflation reality. We receive limited increases to the funding benchmarks, and they do not necessarily cover our inflationary costs. So in particular, when we look at the supplies and services for school operations, and that's the actual maintenance of school facilities, there's a challenge there. Similarly, there's also a cost of employee benefit obligations that we have to contend with. We talked about WSIB, and it's definitely a cost structure that we have as a Schedule II employer, where we have to support the real cost of liabilities for those workers. The last item here for the financial environment is compensation. The collective agreements with almost all our bargaining units are expiring at the end of the year. And although there's, for the most part, there's no cost of living adjustments in there, you'll notice that there is no provisions built into the budget either for cost increases for those cost of living adjustments. And that's in compliance with ministry directives. Next slide, please. So we talked a bit about the declining enrollment. So this chart actually shows our average daily enrollment. It is focused on pupils of the board as the top half, and that is the driver of our average daily enrollment funding. So quite often you'll hear the per pupil funding talked about. And so those numbers actually generate the bulk of our funding. And within the chart on the column to the right, you'll notice that we're projecting a 523 AEE decrease for next year relative to the revised budget. So that has a direct impact on the funding that we have. It also affects our cost structure, because as the enrollment decreases, we adjust our costs of teachers, of our kindergarten ECEs, and also our staffing within the school offices, because it's all formula driven. So next slide, please. So I think this might be a good, I'll just finish this slide. So where we're going on this, so we're projecting a $3.5 million deficit for the upcoming year, and which is a $7.9 million reduction relative to the current year. So that is a very good thing. Mitigating measures, we would have had an $18.5 million deficit in the absence of all the work that has been undertaken to actually reduce our cost structure. So in the bottom is just a summary of our revenues and expenses, and you'll notice that the revenues not increased somewhat, and our expenses are pretty stable. And we'll get into more detail on that, but I thought I'd stop here in case there are any questions on the first part of the presentation.
Seeing any?
Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to get into the revenues. So I'd just like to highlight some of the changes in revenues. Next slide, please. So the key changes is enrollment-based revenue decrease of 8.5 million. So that reflects lower average daily enrollment and the reduction in funding as a result of that. We have increased funding of $9 million for teacher qualification and experience. And so that is very important that we align our costs with our funding. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to be cognizant of as we went into this budget cycle. So that accounts for the adjustment. And we've seen this in past years where our initial estimates are very low and then our community funding goes up to support the costs that we incur. And then the next one is the funding adjustment. We talked a bit about the COLA adjustments for the most part are not there, but there is a contract with principals and vice principals, so we have adjusted costs for those increased costs, and we will be receiving additional funding for that. And similarly, there's some obligations related to health, life and health trusts that we have. Next slide, please. Another significant change is the transfer of 12 education program grants. Those are the responsive education program grants. The responsive education program grants are not part of the core funding. They're generally pilot projects that the ministry announces, and then they may see how it operationalizes. And then, but importantly for this coming year, they've identified that they want to move this money into the core education funding program. And most of it relates to reading and math initiatives, but there are some other areas. And it's a really important step because it indicates that that money should be continuing in the years to come. So those investments will be retained. For the most part, it's revenue neutral because they removed the responsive education funding, but it comes in through the core education grant, so it nets to zero basically. Also, some more information on classroom supplementary supplies. There's increased funding there, and I'm sure you've heard about the $750 per elementary teacher. It's really elementary classroom teacher that will receive the funding and will be responsible for purchasing the supplies that the class needs. And it's really directed to the teacher who has primary responsibility for the classroom. Those are for the classroom supplies. 400 of those dollars is new money. So it's a real investment, and it totals about $1 million. The other amount, $350, is supplemental. Well, it's basically our budgets that we've already allocated to the school that they will be using for this initiative. And then the last item on this slide is the curriculum-aligned learning resources, and it's basically to acquire resources that will meet the curriculum needs across grades 1 through 12 in various subjects and grades. They're both going to be, the second bullet and the third bullet will be required to be acquired from a vendor of record managed through Supply Ontario. So it will not only promote consistency within the district, it's going to be doing that for across the province. Next slide, please. We talked about declining enrollment, so I thought this might be an interesting slide to put in here, just to give you an example of what happens with declining enrollment, so hopefully everyone can see. But you can see that our 523 students dropped based on average daily enrollment. It results in a funding change of $5.6 million, a decrease of $5.6 million. And I'm only looking at the major per pupil amounts. The enrollment is taken into account in various other components of the core education grant. So this is just one area that we were looking at. So the classroom staffing fund is the first section, and that's going to result in a net reduction of $3.2 million in staffing, or funding cost, funding to support our costs in the classroom. We have the Learning Resources Fund, that's also going down from 1.2. Special education, even though our enrollment's decreasing and our needs are increasing, we're getting less funding. And then the Schools Facilities Fund is also showing a reduction in our the amount. And I noted there that another adjustment The ESL, ELD component shown at the bottom of the screen is a $3.5 million decrease. That in itself is an adjustment related to recent immigrants funding. It provides funding to support English as a second language educational needs. And as immigration goes down, so does this funding amount, because it uses a weighted average and a declining funding over a 4-year period.
Kevin, if I can just interject, I did want to highlight a crucially important piece of this slide. With declining enrollment, we do make the necessary adjustments to classroom staffing that is directly related to number of students in terms of the number of classrooms required, therefore the number of classroom teachers. But one of the highlights of this budget is despite decreased funding available for other classroom supports like special education and ESL, we have not moved forward with any reductions in staffing attached to those areas, which really highlights our commitment to maintaining and expanding support for our classroom. So we have come within spitting distance of balance despite decreased revenues in some areas. It is the work of the Student-Focused Resource Optimization Project that has made this possible and allowed us to protect the resources that are desperately needed in classrooms to support outcomes for our students.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to give you a summary of our revenues. It's very high level, and I'm sorry if you cannot read it. Basically, the bulk of our revenues comes from the core education funding, and you can see that it has increased by about $13 million, or will increase by about $13 million, and that reflects some of the changes that the new investments that the ministry is making in supports for students, and also the transfer of the responsive education program grants into that fund. The offset there is provincial, federal, and third-party grants is going to be reduced by about $6.8 million, and that once again is substantially related to the responsive education program grants. We have, for the most part, very stable fees and recoveries. Those are various services that we provide. Community use is one of the bigger ones. We also have secondment recoveries where staff employed by the district are seconded to other organizations, and then we recover the costs from those organizations to offset the costs. And then we also have some other adjustments. So there will be the amortization of deferred capital contributions. Those are generally, they support, there's really a non-financial or transaction, non-cash transaction, I guess you'd say, in that we're not receiving money for it, but it's an accounting entry. So in total, our revenues for compliance purposes will increase by about $7.1 million. Next slide. And I just thought I'd throw this slide in just to give you a sense as to what's in the fees and recoveries, because that is one of the other areas that people would like to see. The investment income is one area. We do expect some moderate growth in that because of increased revenues related to the sale of properties, etc. Another area is adjustment is the secondment recoveries. With less staff being seconded, we will see a reduction in those recoveries. So, for the most part, not very much change in this area. Next slide, please. So, before I get into the expenses, were there any questions? Okay, great, thank you.
We're going to get to the bottom line, and then the other questions will come.
Oh, okay, thank you. Expenses. So the year-over-year change is minor, as you saw. It's about just over $700,000 reduction in expenses, but there are changes in that. So we go to the next one. So one of the biggest changes that we had this year is the very focused work that was done to optimize how we use our resources. The Student Focused Resource Optimization Project was the project name. It launched in December 2025, and its goal was to identify efficiencies to really offset the costs that we were seeing in this year's financial budget. And so we were very successful in our approach. It was a very structured interview sessions and looking at how the work and resources were being used to support students and learning and well-being, but also the corporate structure, like how was the resources being used to support corporate initiatives. And everybody had to gauge the impact, and was it a high value initiative or application of resources, or was it's really trying to ensure that the return on the investment was appropriate. We managed to identify about $15 million in savings through this project, through a combination of staffing and supplies and services budget changes. And the outcome is that it will simplify business processes and will move the decision-making over to closer to the classroom. But it's also important to recognize that a lot of those changes are managed. It's very important to recognize that they were evaluated as being attainable savings, and so that's the important thing. I know in some of my past experience, it was like, oh, we will identify a number, say $3 million of savings to be achieved during the year without achieving those savings. So this was a structured approach. We know exactly where the changes are and how to address that going forward and monitor it. So it was really fully in line with where people plan to spend and how they plan to spend. So, next slide, please. Aside from the optimization project savings, we do have some other costs, and they relate to the ministry's new investments. So that's a positive thing because we're getting the funding. Talked about the core ed funding already, and I thought I'd repeat it here because it's in and the out. So we've already been spending the money, but it's permanent. So that's the good thing now. Classroom supplementary supplies of $1 million. That's we talked about that, and also about the learning resources of $2.2 million. So those are very positive changes that will help our schools because they're really directed at students and the classroom. Next slide, please. I know CEO Kay mentioned that we did make new investments in the system, particularly as related to educational systems. We've identified that we're going to be adding 21.5 EA positions into the organization, which is very important. It does align with the information in the Engage survey and the responses, so I'm pleased with that. And some of these positions are going to be funded using the Indigenous Education Investment, which is also being closely managed. The Indigenous Education, we do receive a specific funding for that purpose, but we're also going to be augmenting that in-year funding with some money that we have set aside for this purpose. And that's going to be allowing us to invest an extra $1.3 million each year for the next 3 years. So that's it's a solid commitment to Indigenous education, and it's money that's there for this particular use. And it will be used to provide culturally safe and educational spaces for those students and to expand the curriculum and learning resources there. Next slide, please. Just thought it would be good to share the staffing by full-time equivalency chart. You can see that there's some significant changes that have been made. Many of these changes relate to lower enrollment. The classroom and resource teachers are being reduced, but that is an important, we're aligning funding and our cost structure to recognize that we do have to have this class size ratios. That's an important element. Similarly, ECE staffing will be reduced, same rationale, and school office and technician positions will be reduced. We talked about the educational assistance, although it shows 13.5, that's my oversight. I did not add the Indigenous education investments into this slide deck, so we will actually see 21.5 educational assistance in this area. There are some reductions, central and school administration and support and custodial. Those are to be expected as part of the resource optimization project. So overall, we're looking at a reduction of 178 positions on this slide, but it would actually be a reduction of 170 once we adjust for the EAs that will be funded through the Indigenous allocation. Next slide, please. I thought this was an interesting depiction of our staffing equivalency by group. Basically, our largest group is the classroom teachers. So classroom resource teachers, over 50%. And then we have other areas, educational assistants also is a large investment, and custodial and maintenance staff is another large area. So we definitely are trying to put resources back into the classroom or the school as best we can. Next slide, please. So, given that we don't have a report, I've put some information on our budgeted expenses into this slide deck. There's 3 slides. Slide 1 talks about the classroom instruction, and you can see there that it's a fairly significant investment. $927 million is proposed to be spent next year, as compared to $916 million in the current year. It also lists all the different types, the breakdown of spending by group. So this is aligned with what we have to report to the Ministry of Education. Classroom teachers, supply staff, EAs, etc. The next slide, please. Slide 2 talks about administration. You can see where the changes in this area. Importantly, you can see that both board administration and the directors and supervisory officers lines have been decreased. Directors and supervisory officers by close to 16% cost reduction, and board administration by close to 11%. Transportation is fairly stable, and pupil accommodation is also partly resource optimization, has identified a number of savings in both staffing and in the supplies and services area. Next slide, please. And then this is just round out the cost right now. We report costs in the ministry. We have it split by program. We report school generated funds, and then we eliminate those as part of the process to determine our compliance with ministry reporting. So overall, we're looking at $1.258 billion of spending next year, which is fairly close to what we have in our revised estimates. Slightly down, but very close. And next slide, please. So before we go into the summary of changes, then just in case there's any questions, I know this is a very lengthy slide deck. So a summary of changes. So what we do as part of our budget development process is we look at our starting point, and then we try to identify the changes that will be made in the coming year to arrive at our draft budget. So the first one, we've categorized it here at a summary level, and then we expand on it in subsequent slides. The compensation-based adjustments are various adjustments to reflect grid progression or compensation cost adjustments related to statutory benefit costs, and those are important elements within there. Their WSIB is also one of the actual costs that we've included in that category. there's one other, it's called vacancy savings, and I'm going to touch on that in the next slide. Enrollment-based and program staffing changes, those are the ones that are directly related to staff costs and changes on those as a result of lower enrollment. We really try to be conservative in how we project our enrollment, because making changes after the start of the year is very challenging, and it creates not only disruption in classrooms, but it also creates financial challenges for us. The resource optimization project is shown there as a significant savings, but we also have some new investments, and that's a very positive thing too. And I think we have changes to the existing costs. Sometimes we'll have changes in grants or specific elements of grants that we have to account for. And then also changes in the grant-funded costs at the bottom. Those are often related to the responsive education programs or other funding that we receive from third parties. Next slide, please. Compensation-based changes. As I mentioned, we talked about bigger movement and benefit costs. We see a significant, relatively significant. It would be even more significant had there been cost of living adjustments included in this year's budget. So that's 11.8 million. But the one that I really want to highlight is the reduction in the salary and gap in budget savings provision. That one, we had over 11 million budgeted as savings. So basically what that is we determine the cost structure for all the employees that are funded or that are incorporated into our budget. And we say that, well, some of these individuals will leave employment during the year, and that will provide us a vacancy saving until such time as the position is staffed, or it may provide a salary gap saving, which is basically the difference between the hurting individual's salary and the lesser salary of the new individual coming in. So that was budgeted at over 11 million, and we thought that we should reduce that to a $5 million provision. So incorporated into the budget is a $5 million provision for those savings, but it's a $6 million recognition that maybe we're not attaining the same savings. And I would suspect that some of that in our forecast that we see, where we had a large difference between our teacher compensation and the Q&E funding, is probably close to the 6 million. So it's a very significant step that we've made to really align our cost structure with our what we expect will happen next year. Have the WSIB costs, I keep bringing that up because it seems to increase every year. And then the employee life and health trust costs will also increase. We do get some funding from the ministry from it, but we still have to absorb some of the other costs that are what the ministry terms board funded or board supported costs, and we say it's embedded in the benchmarks that we have. Next slide, please. Changes in the enrollment-based staffing. Talked about elementary and secondary. You can see the reductions there. Early childhood educators, as we reduce the number of classrooms that we have less staff there, and the school and office technical staff the same. And we do have a provision in there for continuing education teacher costs. There was a change to our adult program. So the adult program is now moved over to the continuing education register, which is different. In the past, they were part of the core education funding envelope. Now they're part of the continuing education envelope. We had to identify this shift. Next slide, please. Extended day and learning, early learning. So modest changes there, with some decisions that is made by this. It's not part of our core educational mandate, but it's an integral part of our organization, providing extended day programs to our students. So a few changes there, generally in the central office. one student-focused resource optimization project in the various areas. Looking at some of the scenarios there. Next slide, please. New investment changes. We have some new custodians coming in for the Brian Elementary School. I don't know if we get that right. We do have some new early provisions, so we don't have it staffed. We don't show the FTE in our staff complement, but there is a provision there for additional staffing at the new school. We've upped the educational assistant staff replacement costs based on our current year experience, and also to recognize that we are adding more staff to the educational assistant complement. So as you increase your staff, one would expect that you will have to replace those staff at the point, at various points during the year. We've added also the educational assistants for the 8 FT Indigenous supports provision. There's also going to be additional investments in Indigenous education. So this once again is a provision, but the FTE has not been confirmed or reflected. The important thing there is that we do have the money to support those investments. Then the last two are the ministry initiatives, consistent curriculum and supplementary classroom investments. Next slide, please. So we do have changes to the existing costs. Information technology does have some cost pressures, but as you know, with continued investments in technology, you will see needs to replace software, update licensing, and those are generally increasing at a far faster than inflation. So that's one of the challenges we have here. We do anticipate some extra international student enrollment in our arrangements with the Ottawa Carleton Education Network, which coordinates that. We provide a fee to manage that, and from that, so that we'll have cost increase. But there's also a reduction in other costs. As a result of the optimization project having been winding down now, we can reduce the provision that we have established there by $750,000. So, excuse me. So there's various adjustments here. One of the ones that I'd like to point out is the facilities renewal. That's a reduction. So the ministry actually caps the amount that you can spend on facilities renewal operating costs. So those are like repairs to schools, not the capital investment, but the operating side of it. And so they provide $5.1 million in funding. We've traditionally spent about $5.8 million. We're going to be a little bit more aware is coming here of the need to try to manage within that funding envelope. And next slide, please. Then we have various changes in grant-funded costs. So we talked about the urban and priority high schools funded costs. That is a specific grant that's given to 2 of our high schools to support their needs. And so they've increased the grant, and we reflect that and transfer that funding and budget envelope over to the schools. Responsive education program grants, that's where we're accounting for most of the reduction in the funding. Some other small adjustments through the various lines there for $4.4 million reduction. And the next slide, please. So that's the end of our expenses related to the operating budget. But now I'd like to just briefly touch on the capital budget, because that's an important investment that we see here too. It's a planned spending. What we do is we identify the funding that we have available to us, and then we develop project plans to best utilize the funding. And that will be developed as part. Most of the work of the capital plan occurs during the warmer months, and when school isn't out. So that's now's the very busy time for our planning and facilities department. The capital priorities funding, we look at about $7.6 million in spending this year. Importantly, A lot of that capital priorities money is money that's used to construct new schools or have major additions to existing schools. So one of the big schools that commitments is the Half Moon Bay High School, and we have a $7.7 million commitment for that school, but we're not going to be spending a lot of that until next year, the following year, the year after next. A lot of the spending that will be conducted during the 26-27 is site preparation, etc. We can use education development charges to acquire and develop plans for new schools. We talked about the school renewal allocations and school condition improvement. They're two unique funding sources, but they work together and to provide us an ability to do major construction projects for schools, building envelopes, window replacements, HVAC systems, building automation. So those are some of the initiatives that will be undertaken under those two grants. And then the last one is minor tangible capital assets. Those are smaller items, furniture, equipment, software, where we have to, it's the funding there is sourced from the core education funding grant. It's moved over into the capital, and amounts that are used are then returned to the operating revenue side of it. So a little bit of an accounting treatment for that money. So in total, our capital budget spending would be $88.5 million in the coming year. Okay, next slide. So the accumulated surplus, the financial impact, we're projecting $3.5 million deficit and unrestricted accumulated deficit of $23.5 million for 26-27. So that's what we are. The unrestricted accumulated deficit is very important. We talked about having a financial cushion. We don't have the financial cushion. It's in the hole. So we need to work to remove that 23.5 and start building a cushion for us to use. There's also restricted surplus for capital. That is a positive balance, but that's restricted. And what that line item actually does is it supports amortization costs of board-initiated capital projects that are not supported by ministry funding. Next slide, please. So this is a quick little summary of the accumulated surplus over the year. And you can see in 21-22 that our unrestricted accumulated surplus was $17.9 million. Very good. That's pretty well close to where you need to be from a financial planning perspective. But then you can see it really start to deteriorate. And that's where over the years it really drops. And it, as I said, we're looking at next year having a deficit, accumulated unrestricted deficit of $23.5 million. Next slide. And this is my last slide. The road ahead. So what we're looking at there is a proactive approach to growing enrollment, retaining our enrollment. We're doing a lot of investments. We want to also engage with the community to have individuals, have students join us. And so we're looking at direct parental outreach and working with the community to engage them and to really promote, and because we provide great programs and are very supportive of our students. We're also looking at the real estate optimization. We've already talked about that. We want to accelerate the sale of our unused properties where we're allowed to reduce our operating costs would be the operating side portion of that. And then it also maximizes our financial resources from a capital perspective that we can use for future investments. And then on goal benchmarking, one of the things that we look at is we want to continue spending appropriately. And one of those things that we will be undertaking in the coming year is looking at how do other school boards spend their money, and can we learn from them? And so we'll be looking at how benchmarking it, and hopefully we can identify additional efficiencies for savings and, once again, resource optimization, but it's there. We do have some significant changes already incorporated through the resource optimization project, but, we're not going to stop. We'll continue to look for appropriate, if an opportunity presents itself, then we'd be looking to take advantage of it, but I think it's the balance. So in conclusion, what I'd say about this budget is it's a $3.5 million deficit. I think is a very reasonable projection of where we're going in next year. We've made a lot of changes to our cost structure. We've been conservative on our revenue estimates. And so I'm cautiously optimistic. I know there's always risk in when you're budgeting, you don't control your enrollment levels. There's always costs that creep up on you at the end of the year or during the year based on outside influences. There could be new programs that you need to respond to for various reasons. So, but the 3.5 million, I was comfortable when I saw that. So I think that's a positive thing. So with that, I think that is my last slide.
Thank you. Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for the very impressive presentation. Originally we were expecting to have all the materials up there, so you adjusted very quickly to be able to provide as much content as possible. It was a long presentation, but if anyone didn't appreciate the complexity and the breadth and the many moving parts of our financial picture, it was certainly on display here tonight with the coverage you gave and the highlights you gave of the budget document and the very impressive command of finances. I know as supervisor from day one when I was here, it was almost a question I couldn't ask, but Kevin didn't have the insight and the answers to, so incredibly valuable member of the team and essential to getting us back in control of our finances. So thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions.
Thanks, Kevin. I also would want to say how well informed you seem to know, so it provides me as a member of the auditing member. The question that I had, you touched upon at the end, almost answered it. How confident are you with these estimates, especially when it comes to expenses? And maybe I'll put a little bit of context in there, and what gives you that confidence?
Two-part question. Yeah, so as I said, I am very comfortable with the amount that we've shown as our deficit for the coming year. I think the expenses side is very, probably more comfortable on that because we can control a lot of those expenses to a good extent. The one caveat I put there is the enrollment. Enrollment is always a challenge. Ideally you would go up because enrollment growth provides additional resources. We saw the table there in the presentation that talked about our reduction in funding as a result of enrollment loss. If it goes the other way, then we're getting extra money and a lot of our cost structure is already fixed. So I would ideally want more enrollment growth. I'm comfortable with the numbers and both the revenues and expenses side. So, and that's where I think, as we all work through this initiative, we were really cognizant of wanting to identify savings and through the resource optimization project that were achievable. Because as I said, putting in a random number into a budget and saying I'm going to achieve those savings is not a good approach to balancing the budget.
Just a follow-up question, because you mentioned resource optimization. You showed board administration costs reduction of about $2 million. from a controls perspective, what's the impact of the simplification of the business processes from a perspective of cybersecurity, fraud, and financial controls?
I'll start, and we're certainly fortunate tonight in that we have several members of our senior team present, and they may be able to add. Where my confidence comes in responding to those types of questions is the process that we employed through the optimization project. It really was a integrated and collaborative process that involved the entire senior team as well as our general managers who often represent the subject area expert for our major corporate structures. So we were in the kind of summarizing and evaluative stage of the project at this point. So to give you a sense of the scope, we evaluated on the unionized side of the equation 2,752 positions and 194 union exempt positions to understand their function and how they operate within the organization. And it was through that methodical and structured approach that we were better able to understand their function within our processes. So we were able to make data-informed decisions and really understood the contribution, most importantly, to student achievement and well-being, but also to corporate compliance. So we bring up, importantly, things like cybersecurity, which is top of mind for school boards in particular and many public sector. So in that area, we do feel that moving forward, we have actually strengthened those investments and our structures to support that work. We do have Sandy Owens, who is our executive officer of our technical support team. And given that we have the benefit of her expertise, I will ask her to comment further on that specific area.
Thank you, CEO. Okay, just to add to that, yes, when we went through the process, we looked at all the IT staff and went through the rigor of looking at their positions, what their functions were, and definitely the security staff as well as our infrastructure team, which is responsible for maintaining our robust network and ensuring that we are secure, were prioritized in terms of maintaining those positions and ensuring that we had sufficient staff to make sure that we could maintain that cybersecurity posture.
Right. First off, that was a good amount of detail, thanks. I wasn't expecting quite that much, so that was much appreciated. And my question is going to be a little, I mentioned WSIP a couple of times. Are those sector-wide increases, like provincially for the sector, that's leading to the increase in the WSIP costs as opposed to organization?
I think it's a combination of both, to be honest with you. But for us in particular, our budget provisions in the past years were just insufficient. We were always doing a year-end accrual of costs to recognize the liabilities that are related to it. And so we've now corrected that permanently, hopefully. Although there will be new cost pressures. There are proposed changes to WSIP legislation that would potentially increase costs for us. And it's converting LOE loss of earnings benefits from, I believe it's 85 to 90%. But that's not solid yet, so it's not reflected in the budget, but that's something that we may have to contend with and deal with it when it comes up.
Just on the, you mentioned one of the key risks is enrollment. And I know in prior years we've been forecasting in this budget, you've actually forecasted a decline in enrollment on average yearly rate of about 500. So there is inherently some, just on an optimism bias, there's some caution around that, but maybe I can ask you, Director Kay, on enrollment, what measures and steps are you taking to, restore parental confidence in the system, to reach out to those who are looking at our district, to send students here, to try to maintain and increase in enrollment in the year ahead?
Thank you, and I appreciate the question because it is a significant focus now and will be a strategic priority moving forward next year. It is a complex question, and we are looking at a multi-pronged approach. The OCDSB is a district of excellence with outstanding programs and services. So we are looking at ways to expand and increase our engagement with families so that they share that confidence when they are making important decisions regarding choices for the education of their child. We have, through the process this year, we have recognized what has served us well and where we would like to expand. An example of that is our FACE team, which simply stands for Family and Community Engagement. We have made a strategic investment to increase and refocus that team so that we are able to spread the work that has been accomplished there to more sites. We have many of the team members present here tonight. We have certainly strategically looked at our communication practices with families and how they are able to see the amazing things happening in our schools every day. We have plans to really create open door opportunities so that families do have the opportunity to experience our school environments and the robust programs and services that are available on a daily basis. We have here this evening General Manager Andrea Rahim. She has built a impressive database regarding that is purely focused on enrollment. So for the first time moving into next year, we are going to have a much clearer picture of where our strengths are and where we have more work to do to ensure that we are really capturing market share and where we need to target our support of our school teams. Certainly we've had tremendous success with where we have employed data-informed decisions. The most important is with respect to student achievement and well-being and ensuring that that data is available and at the fingertips of our school-based leaders. And we believe those practices are just as important when we look at how we're engaging with our families moving forward so that parents are feeling confident and excited to join the OCDSB and to continue their educational journey with us.
You mentioned in your remarks or afterwards, you said we're within spitting distance of the balanced budget. And the work of the student focused resource optimization program had a target that was at least equal to last year's deficit. But given the other changes that were made, enrollment declines and more conservative estimates in both spending and revenue, will there be a student focused resource optimization, lighter, with a smaller target to deal with the $3.5 million deficit? And is there an opportunity perhaps you benchmarking that to try to achieve in your savings in the current year to narrow that deficit?
Thank you for the question. I think an important, one of the most crucial aspects of this year, Kevin and his team are quite modest, so don't often fully communicate the extent of the work that that their team accomplished this year. That credibility analysis was a fundamental turning point that allowed us to really understand where the problematic areas were in our budget planning, and specifically some of those optimism biases that have been highlighted and where our costs were just not representative of reality. When we look to next year, we are not done in terms of there are more financial analyses that do need to be completed so that we better understand our cost structures and how those align to our revenues. And when we have information, of course, is power, and fueled by that, we do anticipate that it will highlight other opportunities where we can become more efficient or where the other savings are possible. So we are early in that work. We've made tremendous progress next year, but as we look to the next school year, there are several more areas of analysis that we do believe are key to really take us to that. We're so close now to achieving balance. We are very close to crossing that line and again being in a position to importantly build those financial reserves. We do look forward to continuing to provide updates to the committee next year as that work continues and we have more specificity on what that might look like as next year continues. There has been a whole shift in terms of particularly at the senior team level with respect to the financial culture and the education that the finance team has provided so that we are interacting and understanding the complexities of the finances that are required to move this district forward in a way that's stable and that allows us to strategically invest in the areas that we know are required to provide excellent supports to our students and families. We've started that work. I think no more clear example than the 21.5 additional EAs in spite of decreased revenues in that area. So we are optimistic that that is a sign of what is to come.
Before we turn to the next item, is there any follow-up?
I have a follow-up question, I guess maybe for Governor. So how frequent do you expect to do regular basis during the year?
So as we start to go into the new year, we're going to also be looking at the current year and saying, you know, are the projections, are they accurate? Are they well informed? Have we missed anything? And then to be monitoring that. Once we're into the new year, of course, we do our revised estimates, which is submitted in December. And so that would be one of the earliest indicators of where we're going in the new school year. And so then from that we'll do quarterly monitoring. You know, but there's a lot of work that will be undertaken during the intervening months between those reports. And it's really, as Stacey noted, that we are really looking at now program-specific areas and saying, you know, does this make sense? And I know a lot of the focus has been on costs, but you know, there's revenue opportunities potential there. So we need to look at that too. So it's really to try to find the best way forward.
If I can add to that, as someone new to the board who's taking off for the first year, on a daily basis in September, Sean Lehman, who's here today, would be coming to the table with the latest figures on enrollment, where does it line up with what we're expecting, and and the movement of teachers around. So you get a pretty good sense, early on in the new year, where we're at with enrollment, which is a trigger for a lot of other cost implications and the bottom line. So that monitoring is, I think, at least September is daily. So let's move to item 7.4, which is the regional independent audit team, and I'll call upon Ms. Seguin to provide an update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through Mr. Chair, this is the item that I bring. I bring the audit committee to inform the audit committee members of the progress of the plan that you were tracking from November look at, the first page of the report, there's actually an errata. We only have 4 companies, not 5, and 2 in reporting. We're overly hopeful to bring this report to the subcommittee meeting, but we will be bringing it in September. So I think it still shows that, you know, we've been progressing well. We will also do follow up on this that was presented in camera in closed session. So we will be taking that on presenting our data on 100% of data. Those that you benchmarking, we will be presenting more detailed in the closed session as well as facility benchmarking. So that concludes my report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So any questions? I know we're going to go through an in-camera session immediately after this meeting, but questions? Okay. Is there any bad news? Seeing none, I wanted to thank the finance team and our CEO and our regional audit team, and especially our volunteer audit committee members. This is our last meeting of the school year. We'll be back, I'm sure, the next in the fall, September. So we'll be back in September for our first meeting of the new year. As soon as our draft budget is officially through the system, it's our intention to post all the information, and certainly receive any additional feedback that's forthcoming from the community and obviously from the party members who if you want to follow up on, we can do that less formally. So our next meeting will be in December, and I now declare this meeting September, yes. I now declare this meeting adjourned, and we're going to go into private session, so I'll ask committee members to move to the trustees.